All right, next up, in the fringe RB2, RB3 category, I'm going to put David Montgomery. This might come as a shock to a lot of people, but David Montgomery was a lot better in the first half when he was the starter than he was in the second half when he was the backup for Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously had some good games down the stretch, a lot of touchdowns, which is what you're hoping for with David Montgomery. But now he is the backup. Jahmyr Gibbs did take over as a starter, got the starter's workload when it comes to snaps as well, played over 50% of the snaps all the way down the stretch, except for one game where David Montgomery played a little bit more. But David Montgomery, if he's not scoring touchdowns, may hurt your fantasy team this year. I think he will be on the RB2, RB3 fringe for the most part. I think on a weekly basis, you'd want him as your RB3 instead of starting for your roster. Next up, we got DeAndre Swift, who potentially could be higher than this in a brand new offense in Chicago, away from that Philly offensive line. A lot of weapons for this Chicago Bears team in the passing game. New rookie Rome Odunze. Also got Keenan Allen. And then also we have DJ Moore as well. So with Caleb Williams leading the attack, obviously the team is probably going to look to protect him through the run game. There's also a couple younger options there. Khalil Herbert, who flashed signs at times last season, and also Rashawn Johnson, who the team drafted and can use in goal line situations. I think DeAndre Swift will be using the passing game, but it'll be tough to trust him as your starting RB2 on a weekly basis. All right, next up, we got Tony Pollard, who's going to be a backup or starter, depending on who you're asking. I think it's more of a 1A, 1B situation, and you don't see Tajay Spears down here in this list as well. I would put those two kind of close together. I would rather have Tony Pollard, who's proven he's proven he can be a back in this league, whether it's a starter or as a backup. Obviously didn't have the year he wanted to have last year as the RB14 for Dallas as the starter. But I think in a complementary role, we've seen Tony Pollard look amazing at times. So to me, this is probably the best case scenario for Tony Pollard. Go to a Tennessee team that needs him to be explosive, work in different situations. And I think Tajay Spears, who's not listed here, could also fit in this category as well as a back who has potential and we'll see workload. Now, the thing with Spears and Pollard both is I think they'll both be inconsistent, but I do think we'll get Tony Pollard in the passing game a little bit more than Tajay Spears. All right, next up in this tier is Brian Robinson, who's not a sexy name at all. But in this case, we know he's going to receive a majority of the work in the red zone and then also in the run game. The team signed Austin Eckler and drafted Jaden Daniels. So under Cliff Kingsbury, this offense is going to look a little bit different, but Brian Robinson should still see a good amount of touchdowns, good amount of yardage in the run game. That should at least leave him somewhat startable, but I could see some down weeks for Brian Robinson if he's not used in the passing game as frequently. All right, next up, we got Zach Moss. And Zach Moss, to me, does fit this RB2, RB3 range. Won't catch a ton of passes in this offense, but we saw when he had the starter's role for the Indianapolis Colts last year when Jonathan Taylor was down. He played well, man, had a couple 100-yard games. And obviously the team has Chase Brown behind him to help out in the passing game and with the explosive plays. But Zach Moss could have a nice season with the Cincinnati offense who's able to move the football. So I see him getting the red zone work, a majority of the carries. Just not a whole lot of involvement in the passing game. Kind of reminds me of what we're going to see out of like maybe a Brian Robinson. I think they're very similar type backs. Zach Moss is in the better offense, but obviously that offense is led by Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. So I like Zach Moss. I'm just being a little bit more cautious. I think that he has limited upside in the Cincinnati Bengals offense, but also has a decent floor. All right, and this last tier is going to be RB3 flexes with a lot of question marks. We got Javonte Williams to start this, and I think depending on how this offseason goes, this could even be worse if Sean Payton does decide to cut him in favor of keeping Samaje Perine on the roster. A couple backs have already made it, Audric Esteem, and then also Jaleel McGlowan. So the last spot is up for debate. Javonte Williams, coming off of ACL last year, played decent, probably could have played a little bit better, but understandable coming off a major injury like that. We got to see how the recovery process is looking and if he can earn a roster spot. If he does, I do think he would still be the starter for Denver. Next up is Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards belongs in this tier now as a starter for the Los Angeles Chargers, coming off a 15-touchdown season for the Baltimore Ravens. And now he has the opportunity to get a lot more work under Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman in this Los Angeles Chargers offense, obviously led by Justin Herbert, who can move the ball down the field. But if Gus Edwards is somewhere around the 250 to 275 touch marker, I think he should have a decent season this year, probably eclipsing 1,000 yards and being around 8 to 10 touchdowns. So Gus Edwards, to me, it probably has a little bit of upside here, not a whole lot, and I think you can get him out of value. All right, next up is Nick Chubb, who is coming off of a torn ACL, MCL, PCL, a whole lot of knee tears. But if he can get back, obviously this guy has the kind of upside you want to see. I have my concerns that he bounces back, but I think if he comes back sooner than later, maybe we get a little bit of value on it. If he's not looking like himself until midseason, this is probably a player we're going to want to avoid. So I have him in this tier of RB3 flex. I do think he's the type of back that could be in the RB2 tier. I also could see, a situation where we're not rostering Nick Chubb at times if he's not able to look like himself. So I think this is a big wild card. That's why I have him here in this RB3 flex territory. I wouldn't want to draft him ahead of any of the backs that I have ahead of him right now. All right, next up we have Jaylen Warren, who's going to be Jaylen Warren, obviously a good pass catching back in this new Arthur Smith system. He played well last year, was the RB25. So a lot of positive things for Jaylen Warren out of the backfield last year. And I'm just expecting Najee Harris to take a little bit bigger load under Arthur Smith, who prefers to use more power backs in his offenses. We've seen that in Atlanta. We also saw it in Tennessee with Derrick Henry. So Jaylen Warren should have a role, should still be a nice piece, but I'm betting that he's more of the flex category. Do I think he can outperform this on a weekly basis? Absolutely. I think he has the upside to take things to the house, to be a big playmaker. But for the most part, I think we're going to see him in an RB3 flex role on a week-to-week basis. And then Ezekiel Elliott is back in Dallas now, and obviously the touchdown should be there. Opportunity should be there for him. It's just a matter of is he going to outproduce Rico Dowdle? Is this a situation where Zeke is a starter, or is Dowdle a starter? And I think we have to see a lot more here over the next few weeks. I'm going to assume right now that Zeke was signed to be the starter here, even though he got backup pay. But there's a lot of incentives for him to kind of make starter money. So I want to see how this thing plays out over the offseason. But as of now, as of July, I think Ezekiel Elliott should be up here and could be a value in drafts if he gets more work than we're expecting. And then we got some rookies. Blake Corum is the one I like the most. I think he has the most immediate upside within the offense for Sean McVay. As far as, red zone usage, potentially being used in the red zone, he's had a very strong offseason. The team has raved about him all offseason, especially Sean McVay. Nothing but positive things to say about Blake Corum. So in this offense, he should be really good. And I think that Blake Corum should have an opportunity now to crack into RB2 or RB1 territory if Kyron were ever to go down. Blake Corum, a very high upside lotto ticket here at the back end of your draft. Next up is Jonathan Brooks, who a lot of analysts have a lot higher than this. He's dealing, he's coming off of a torn ACL himself, has to work himself into the starting spot over Chuba Hubbard on a team that's not really that great of an offense. So for me, I think it's also another lottery pick ticket, but we got to make sure he's healthy. And this could be a player that we don't see the full potential of until midseason or after. So I like Jonathan Brooks, the player, and I think if he was fully healthy, I'd obviously have him much higher. A lot of people are not concerned about his ACL recovery because of his age. And I don't think that's fair with the team that already has an established decent running back in place right now in Chuba Hubbard. So I like Jonathan Brooks for the upside, but I think you can do better in your drafts right now. And then the last spot is Trey Benson, who could also take over the starting role from James Conner. And I can see him being a starter down the stretch, or if anything were to happen to James Conner throughout the year, I think he'll have some immediate flex upside, as I believe the team will try to use them both in combination. But his value is completely tied to James Conner and the Cardinals' record. If the Cardinals are good in playoff contending, I think James Conner would keep the role, especially if he's healthy. And then if not, Trey Benson would have an opportunity to take over late in the season if the Cardinals' record does get out of hand. So let me know your guys' thoughts. These are my running backs. And yes, I think that you can maneuver them all, but these are the tiers that I have them in as of right now. If you agree, disagree, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.